Hi. So the topic of this video is the Four Noble Truths and smartphone addiction. So a little background as to how I came to this topic. So I'm currently teaching a critical thinking course, and there's a couple of facts about this critical thinking. Some, of course, some important, some less important. But one is that I've actually included philosophies of meditation as part of the rollout of teaching critical thinking. And in a separate video, I'll explain what critical thinking and philosophies of meditation have in common. But one other detail that is kind of very important, or more important, is that I instituted a technology ban for our in-class meetings in this course. And the reason is as follows. So I've decided to run this as a flip class, and a flip class is where you treat classroom not as a time to deliver teaching and lecture, but as a time for basically homework, that you're working on the ideas, you're having conversations, you're trying to figure out what it is that you don't understand, and then the teaching is offloaded to video lectures. And so, I do this for two reasons. First of all, I find that, philosophy is kind of taxing. So if you lecture and then expect people to have a conversation afterwards, they're often too fatigued. Really what they need is to hear the lesson, think about it, and then come back and have a conversation. So I institute my teachings via video lectures, and then the classroom conversation the classroom meetings really relegated to conversation. And so students are supposed to, I'll give them questions, they'll split up in groups, they'll talk about the questions, we'll reconvene, and we'll sort out our responses. So because this context doesn't require anybody to take notes, I outlaw technology. And so really traditionally when I was a student in my undergraduate years, we didn't have laptops. That showed up when I was a graduate student. But, we didn't have laptops. We would just, write the old-fashioned way. But you would only need to make notes if there was a lecture, but there's no lecture in my classes, right? Because it's all on video, and then we talk together. So, at least in this class. And so I've instituted a technology ban. But despite the fact that there is a ban, students compulsively reach for their cell phone, have their laptops open, even after I tell them remind them once again that this is not part of the course policy. And even stranger still, I point out that we've covered philosophies of meditation in our courses that they could use, to reflect upon their compulsion to reach for smartphones, computers, etc. So that's a phenomenon. So one of the interesting facts about this scenario is that people are reaching for technology even though there's no need for it, right? And the fact that they're reaching for it even though there's no need for it, and there's an explicit rule that says you're not supposed to do it, shows that this reaching for is not a kind of reasonably thought out exercise of choice. It's what ancient philosophers of meditation would have called a samskara, a tendency, impression, a disposition to act in a certain way based on past experiences and choices. Okay, so what kind of compounds the irony of the entire scenario where I see these students, simply not, and it's only for an hour. I also like to kind of clarify that we meet for about an hour, and it's only an hour, and then we talk together, and then we leave. It's not all that long, really. So you would think that people would be able to go without their smartphones or their laptops for that time, but a lot of people have difficulty. So that, even after I call them out, I'll see them do it again within like 5 minutes. All right, so compounding the irony is that, we've been talking about these philosophies of meditation, and philosophies of meditation, address these kinds of compulsions that we have. Okay, so I want to generalize a little bit about philosophies of meditation. I cover in this course 2 philosophies of meditation. The philosophy from the Yoga Sutra, and then early Buddhist philosophies of meditation. Okay, they're similar and also different. So one thing that philosophies of meditation have in common is that they take a kind of critical view of the facts, right? There's a sense in which philosophies of meditation both acknowledge that there are facts or there are truths, and also recommend that we shouldn't take them too seriously. Okay, and I think this is actually a very interesting and important contribution to our intellectual heritage, right? Because there are traditions where truth or the facts are the most important thing, right? So we'll read in Plato that, reason is this kind of flight where what it's searching for is the truth. This ends up being a theme in the history of Western philosophy. But I think one of the interesting things about these early philosophies of meditation from the South Asian tradition is that they acknowledge that there are truths, but these aren't necessarily reasonable. They can be stupid truths, right? Unreasonable truths, but nevertheless truths, right? And so there's 2 ways that we could deal with these truths. One is we could simply pretend like we're not taking them seriously, but what we're really doing is we're leaving them as is and then working our way around them, right? So imagine, for instance, that that you're gaining weight, and you're gaining weight simply because of lifestyle choices, right? You're eating too much and not exercising enough, or both, right? And that you could fix this if you tweak one of these elements, but you simply decide to leave things as is. Also appreciating that excessive weight gain is not going to be good for you, right? So in this case, right, the individual that we're thinking about is in a way not taking this fact seriously, but in a way they are, because they're actually leaving it in play while they organize their life around it. So psychologically, they might feel like they're cool with it, like it's no big deal. But what they're really doing is that they're making every other aspect of their life accommodate this weight gain that they could intervene in if they wanted to, okay? In the scenario, right? We're not thinking about cases where there's nothing conceivable that they could do. This is all within their power, okay? It's part of the scenario that we've conceived. But there are all sorts of things like that, right? You might think about, let's say you're getting behind in some important task that you need to complete, right? Like maybe it's like your household chores, or maybe you've taken a course and you're not keeping up with the assignments, right? There's one way you could approach it where you're like just simply cool with the fact that you're not keeping up with things. And that's a way we can think about not taking that fact seriously. But ironically, we're actually we're accommodating this fact in numerous ways by not interrupting it, in changing it. Because, if I let my life kind of become a mess, then every other aspect of my life has to accommodate that fact of me as someone who has this kind of out of control life. Then there's the kind of meditational yogic approach where we appreciate these facts as things that need to be disrupted, that we have to do something that disrupts these pathological facts of our lives. Okay? That's a way to take these facts not seriously, right? We take them not seriously as things that we don't need to preserve, right? Things to be destroyed. But that approach requires that we do something. It's not just about feeling cool or accepting the way things are, right? Or being kind of, at bliss or having a peace of mind. Like, you have to do something to disrupt the problem. So one of the interesting things I think about these early philosophies of meditation is that they're all kind of quite on board with this idea that there are these facts, a lot of them are stupid, and we have to do something to disrupt those stupid facts. And practices of meditation are exactly that. They're practices designed to disrupt these stupid facts of our life. Okay, so another commonality that these philosophies of meditation share is this criticism of attitudes, right? So you could have criticism of attitudes as things that substitute for thinking. So, to make this distinction clear, consider the thought that it's raining outside, right? So I could think the thought it's raining outside, but I don't know if it's true or false, and I'd have to go and investigate by looking outside to determine whether it's true or false. Or I could substitute thinking it's raining outside with believing that it's raining outside. In this case, I have the thought, but it's wrapped up in an attitude of endorsement. Oh, it really is a case that it's raining outside. Or maybe I fear that it's raining outside. Then I'm worried that it is, and maybe I'm so scared I won't even look outside because maybe I'm like water phobic or something. So philosophies of meditation criticize attitudes because what happens is that we confuse something that could be true or false with a kind of subjective approach to life, our attitudes. And this confusion means that we're not really in a position to address or disrupt or interrupt the facts of life that are stupid. Okay, so I think this is kind of a general commonality between early South Asian philosophies of meditation. So one philosophy that brings both of these elements together is early Buddhism and the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so the Four Noble Truths are four truths, but they're not all equally kind of good, right? So the first two truths are truths that Buddhists think that we need to disrupt. And the second two truths are the truths we need to disrupt the first two truths, right? So the first truth is that life is dukkha, and dukkha means something like discomfort. It's a problem. And then the second truth is that there's a cause to dukkha, and this cause is desire. Okay, now why is desire the cause of discomfort? Well, we need to know a little bit about the background of Buddhist philosophy, and the background goes something like this. Reality, according to Buddhists, is dependently originating. So the principle of dependent origination is the most basic commitment of Buddhists. And this is apparently what the Buddha intuited while he was meditating under the Bodhi tree. And when he intuited the fact of or the law or the principle of dependent origination, at that moment he achieved nirvana. So the principle of dependent origination claims that all things are caused, right? So there's no kind of absolute beginnings, right? So often we hear these stories of there was nothing and then all of a sudden something, right? The Buddhists or people who are committed to dependent origination will say, well, hold on, kind of cash out this beginning where there was nothing. And what they would point out is that the more we cash out what this nothing was like, the more we see is that it was conditioned by all sorts of different factors and qualities and attributes. And so what seemed like an absolute beginning is really just an arbitrary starting point, right? Even in our own lives, right? It seems like everything starts like when we were born or, when we started to remember things. But that's just an arbitrary point in a whole series of events that are causally related. Okay, now, if that's reality, if reality is just this objective relationship of causes, then to approach it subjectively via what we want is to set ourselves up for a kind of mismatch, right? So there's this reality and it's like causally interdependent and it's doing its own thing, and then maybe there's some part of this reality that seems like we can grasp and it fulfills the sense of what we lack, okay, what we want, what we desire. And for a while it seems like it's, we've got our thing and we're good. But then because dependent origination is doing its own thing, after a while it could start to become not so pleasant to be around, right? And so we can think about our own, but early Buddhists suggest think about your own body, right? Like you desire its continuity and you want it to be, to be you. And then, sadly, often what ends up happening is that the causally related parts of you start to stop working together in a way that satisfies your desires and expectations. Okay, so, but because dependent origination is objective and our desires are subjective and there's a kind of mismatch, right? We set ourselves up for disappointment and discomfort because we're approaching what's objective subjectively. Okay, so that's the cause of dukkha. That's the second noble truth. Third noble truth, there's an end to this problem. Okay, now you have to appreciate that, otherwise you would think that that's just the way it has to be, right? But this is where the philosophy of meditation kicks in. The third noble truth tells you, no, it doesn't have to be this way. And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, which is supposed to specify, or which specifies several steps that are supposed to take the desiring individual who has a life of difficulty to a state of nirvana where they're liberated. So one of the ways to capture the value system of the fourth noble truth, what we're supposed to embrace instead of desire, is that what the Eightfold Path kind of exemplifies is compassion. So instead of thinking about life as something that has to satisfy our expectations, right, we think that the point of living is to solve the problem of people suffering, right? And the difference is that latter compassion approach is objective. It's responsive to the objective reality of difficulty in life. And that's very different from the subjective sense of not getting what I want. Okay? Because in the case of compassion, we have a way to understand the problem and the solution independently of our own individual perspective. Right? All we have to do is kind of solve the injuries or the traumas or the problems of dependently originating beings to get rid of dukkha. But in the case of the desire, if we start with desire instead of compassion, there's no way to solve that problem because forever we will approach the objectivity reality from a subjective perspective and always be disappointed eventually. All right, so one of the things that I pointed out to my students is that, after I was like, this is a problem. People keep on doing these disruptive things in class, like we're supposed to be here to talk about the material, we're supposed to engage with each other, and instead people are kind of doing disruptive things, and they're reaching for their phones, or they're opening up their laptops, and they're not really acknowledging each other, and not really interacting with each other. They're retreating into this kind of subjective world of like, I need this. And so I pointed out, well, look, we've talked about these philosophies of meditation, and you could use these as a way to come to terms with what's going on. What's going on? Let's take Buddhism as our kind of solution model, right? Is that you have a samskara, or this desire that is developed out of this habit of having a cell phone, right? So you want it there, smartphone or your computer. Maybe and almost always these days it's texting your friends. I used to sometimes see students watching the game or something, but quite frequently it's texting their friends, right? And you've got this desire to do this in class, and then there's this rule that says don't do it because we're here to engage with each other, and so it creates a problem because you have these expectations and this desire that's always being fulfilled by actually grabbing your phone and texting your chum, and the fact that you're not allowed to do that sets up a kind of withdrawal symptom, much like what one would experience if you kind of stop smoking or stop drinking, and you have this history of doing both, and it's a painful experience, right? So what do people do when they're addicted? Well, they try to get the object that they desire, right? Because that seems to fulfill this sense of anxiety and loss, because it's as though there's like an emptiness that's shaped a certain way, and the object of our desires kind of fits there. And then once it fits there, we're good, right? But the problem, of course, is that that's not reasonable. There's no good reason when you're in class and you're supposed to be learning that you should be texting your friend. Because if you're doing that, you're wasting your time in class, not learning what you need to be learning, and you're distracting other students. Okay, so, I mean, I pointed this out to my students, and then within the span of 10 minutes after I pointed out that they had the resources they needed to address these problems, I saw this recidivism. People were going back to kind of not participating, not doing what we were all there to do. They were reaching for their technology, etc. So, okay, so what does this tell us, right? So one way you might look at this is like, oh, well, philosophy is not worth, like, it didn't do anything, right? I taught them this philosophy. They studied this philosophy. They wrote an exam on it. But here they are still behaving in a way as though it didn't penetrate. So I think that's one way you could look at it. But I think the deeper, or the kind of the more insightful approach that philosophers of meditation point out is that there's one way to just say that we understand things by just kind of nodding our head. But it's another to understand them independently of our attitudes, right? And also as a criticism of the stupid facts of our life, right? So, we could have an attitude like, oh, that's on the test, I should memorize it. Or we could try to understand what these philosophies of meditation are telling us about the stupid facts of our life that we should do something to disrupt. Now, if you're going to engage with these philosophies of meditation at that level, right, that's the level at which you can actually make positive changes in your life, where you go after the stupid facts and you make use of meditational practices, broadly conceived, to disrupt those facts of your life. But in order to do that, you actually have to do some philosophy, right? It's not about just like, oh, that's going to be on the test, I should know it. It's about appreciating that there are certain facts of life that are not reasonable. And these facts that are not reasonable are exactly the kinds of facts that we need to disrupt. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, one way to avoid doing that is to simply just participate in the lectures as someone who thinks that they just have to acquire attitudes, like, oh, I believe that the professor wants me to say that. And then there's another way we actually understand the material as something we have to investigate ourselves, right? And that approach, where we start to understand the material as something we have to investigate ourselves, is actually doing philosophy. And what people usually think philosophy is just like, oh, believing it's going to be on the test, right? Which isn't philosophy. That's just a way to leave the facts as they are without actually investigating and potentially disrupting them.